Today, we're diving into one of the most polarizing and just wild criminal cases in recent memory, the Karen Reed case. You see, this is a story with two completely different realities, and we're going to unpack both of them.
So let's set the scene. It's January 29th, 2022. A massive blizzard is hammering Massachusetts. And in the middle of it all, John O'Keefe, a veteran Boston police officer, is found unconscious in the snow outside another officer's house. He was pronounced dead shortly after. And right there, that's the question that tore a town apart and had the whole country watching. The prosecution story? His girlfriend, Karen Reed, ran him over with her SUV in a drunken fight. But the defense? They claimed it was a massive conspiracy, that she was framed by other cops to hide what really happened. All right, so before we get into all the drama and the crazy accusations, we need to lay down the groundwork. Let's start with the things that pretty much everyone agrees on, the timeline of John O'Keefe's last night. The night kicks off pretty normally. They hit a couple of bars, meet up with friends, and then head to an after party at the home of another officer, Brian Albert. They get there just after 12:20 in the morning. But it's what happens in those next 5 hours that's the heart of the whole mystery, ending with that frantic 911 call just after 6 a.m. So what about that big time gap? Well, the prosecution had a theory, and it was a dark one. They basically painted a picture of a relationship that was falling apart and just exploded that night. Let's look at the evidence they used to build that story. The state's case really hinged on connecting Karen Reed's SUV directly to O'Keefe's death. They found pieces of her broken taillight right there in the snow near his body. They found a hair matching his DNA on her bumper. And to top it all off, they had paramedics testify that they heard a hysterical Karen Reed say, "I hit him." And then there was this. A truly brutal voicemail she left for O'Keefe just minutes after they supposedly arrived at the party. For the prosecution, this was the smoking gun. This wasn't just some angry message. It was proof of her state of mind. It was their motive. And all of that led them to this really serious charge, second-degree murder. Now, this is important because it's not just saying she accidentally killed him. The state was arguing she intentionally used her car as a weapon. That intent, even if it was in the heat of the moment, is what makes it murder. Okay, so that's the prosecution's story. But the defense? They came back with something absolutely explosive. They argued Karen Reed wasn't a killer at all. No, they said she was the perfect scapegoat in a massive police cover-up. They went after the prosecution's case piece by piece. They argued O'Keefe actually went inside that house, was beaten up, and then dumped outside. They claimed that evidence, like those little pieces of taillight, was planted. And, maybe most importantly, they brought in federal crash experts who said O'Keefe's injuries just didn't match up with being hit by a car. And right at the center of this whole cover-up theory, you've got the lead investigator himself, State Trooper Michael Proctor. The defense dropped a bombshell. He had close personal ties to the Albert family and other key witnesses, something he totally failed to mention at first. A huge conflict of interest.
And if you needed any proof of his bias, well, just look at this. These are his own words, texted to his friends just hours after O'Keefe's body was found. The disgusting language he used to describe Karen Reed, and the fact he'd already decided she was guilty before an autopsy was even done, it just destroyed his credibility.
And it wasn't just the bias. The defense hammered home just how sloppy the whole investigation was. I mean, we're talking about allegations of collecting blood evidence from the snow in red Solo cups. You hear that and you have to wonder, is this just incompetence or is something else going on? So you've got these two totally opposite stories. It all comes down to a trial. Let's see what happened. Because the verdict? Well, that was just the start of it. The first time they tried this case in 2024? Nothing. The jury was completely deadlocked. They debated for over 25 hours and just couldn't agree. That tells you everything about how convincing or how flawed both arguments were. So it ended in a mistrial, and they had to do the whole thing all over again. And then, on June 18th, 2025, the second jury came back. And wow, it was a massive win for the defense. Not guilty of second-degree murder. Not guilty of manslaughter. Not guilty of leaving the scene. The only thing they convicted her on was operating under the influence. So what about that one guilty charge? Well, the penalty was pretty standard for a first-timer. 1 year of probation. That's it. After all this, after facing life in prison, Karen Reed walked out of court a free woman. The consequences of this verdict were huge, and they started right away. First up, the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, fired by the Massachusetts State Police for his conduct. And it didn't stop with him. We're talking at least 4 other officers connected to this whole thing. Suspended, transferred, put on leave. A total mess that suggested a deep, deep problem. You want to know how the public felt? Just look at this. After the trial, a survey found that the district attorney's support in the town had cratered to just 4%. 4. Basically, nobody trusted the justice system there anymore. You'd think a verdict would bring some closure, right? Not here. Not in Canton. This case just ripped the town in half, turning neighbors into enemies. It left behind this toxic mess of protests, vandalism, and feuds that are still going on. Which really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? A jury gave a verdict, but it didn't give anyone a truth they could all agree on. The legal battle might be over, but for a town this broken by questions of murder and conspiracy, you have to wonder, is this case really closed? Or is it a long, long way from being over?